So can everybody see it? Is it big enough? Can you see the? How about that? Does that help?
That's better.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
it's better.
Whoops, that probably took it right out of there. There we go. Okay. All right. So antitrust is really kind of I think it's a neat topic, although it's not something that I typically practice in, but I got pretty close to it with the company that I was with, and the fundamental objective of antitrust law is to protect and promote free and fair competition in the marketplace for the benefit of the consumers. And they reflect the view that competitive markets provide consumers with the highest quality of goods and services at the lowest prices. To further this, antitrust laws will prohibit conduct that reduces competition by unfair means. And I want to emphasize unfair means. In one of the things that I was responsible for in my last company was creating a global standard code of conduct. And a couple of the customers that we had, which was one of them was Safeway, they were major grocery chains because we were selling canned tuna. And they required a code of conduct, not only for suppliers, but also for the company itself, the employees. And they are two different codes of conduct, but they are very similar. But you don't merge the two together. Anyway, can anybody maybe take a guess at something that's in a code of conduct that that protects an employee? I know we're talking about antitrust, but it's a key part of standard code of conducts. Just a guess. Yes, it does tell them about conduct that is not acceptable, and the kind of conduct, it gives a guide to the types of conduct that they are expected to adhere to. But then there's also something else in there that protects the employee as well. Any thoughts? Take a guess. Whistleblower. Okay, so in a code of conduct, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but in a code of conduct, you should always have anonymous hotlines where your employees can call if they want to report unfair trade or fraudulent activities. So it's not only for antitrust, but some other types of conduct that would be going on out in the marketplace, whether it's with customers or employees. And it's very important that a company has an anonymous tip line. And the company that I worked for, their hotline came back to our human resources department. And when we developed this, I argued against this because it doesn't provide the employee, it doesn't provide a separation of the company, between the company and the employee, so that they can freely, share their concern. Now, ultimately, it would come back to the company, but the onus would then be on the company to react to that and to investigate and, return some fair and objective either investigation or, answer to the employee. And that did not happen in my company. Fortunately, they were investigated by somebody outside, so we didn't have that. But we did have some employees that returned comments on the hotline, and were very disgruntled to find out that it came back to the Human Resource Department. So U.S. antitrust laws, they're the oldest and they're the most developed of the global competition laws, and the criminal and civil penalties associated with violations of the U.S. antitrust laws, they are among the most severe in the world. And U.S. enforcement authorities exercise their jurisdiction as regularly and vigorously as far as they can. And I'll go a little bit into how my company was investigated. This particular presentation will definitely focus on the U.S. antitrust laws, but remember this, that each country that you do business in has its own particular antitrust enforcement policy. How many of you have heard of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act? Has anybody heard of that before? So the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act it's a U.S. law, but it protects globally. And again, my company was, I investigated that particular occurrence. And what it was we had a sales manager that for years had sold product to Taiwan. And he had sold product to one of the Taiwanese officials who had his own little brokerage for tuna fish going on. Not only tuna fish, but other fish that he was buying from us. And what they were doing is they would create the pro forma, which is not the actual invoice that you bill from, but the pro forma is the invoice that you create that goes to the customer, and they give to the entry when the product comes into that country. It was less than what the actual billing invoiced price was. So tell me why someone would do that? Do you have an idea of why they would do that?
So just to clarify, were they reporting to the government that they were paying less than what they actually were? Is that what the situation was?
That's correct. That was why they created a pro forma. They created the price per pound probably close to 40% less than what it was actually billed at. And the purpose of that, the customer is willing to pay for full price, but he wanted the pro forma written at a lesser price so he didn't have to pay the tariffs and the taxes on it. Now, where this comes into play is violating Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is if we're selling to a government. All right. Now, even though this individual was a government employee, it did not violate Foreign Corrupt Practices Act because the government didn't benefit. It was going to his own personal company. So, I share that with you because, you could easily, assume that, oh, well, he's a government employee of Taiwan. He's buying this product, and he certainly is subject to potentially individual tax issues, but he did not violate Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and conversely, we did not either. So, but we were investigated for that. So, but even though it didn't violate that, we were the Department of DOJ, Department of Justice, did come in and investigate it very thoroughly. I think they were pretty disappointed they didn't find anything. But anyway, to move on, the Department of Justice does get very vigorous and absolutely will not have any remorse with taking something forward. So, overview of U.S. antitrust law. So can somebody give us kind of a rundown on what the Sherman Act is? So we've got the Sherman Act, Clayton, and Federal Trade Commission, FTCA. And there's also state and international antitrust laws that are very, similar to these federal laws. And violations of any of these laws can lead to severe penalties for individuals and companies. By the way, ignorance of the law is no defense. They absolutely will not tolerate anything. And I can tell you that the investigation that we went through on the price fixing, they could have cared less whatever excuse we came up with. When business conduct is challenged as being anti-competitive under U.S. antitrust laws, the courts apply either of two standards. And so they look at the conduct as either illegal per se, meaning that is prohibited regardless of its effect on competition. And most conduct comes under the rule of reason, meaning that it's permitted, that it is permitted if its overall effect is to enhance competition for the benefit of the consumers. So they have like a two-prong review there. So can anybody talk about the Sherman Act at all? Talk a little bit about what it is.
Is the Sherman Act something about anti-monopoly?
Right, it reduces or limits the ability of competitors to compete. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And it prohibits any agreement, or express or implied, that has the effect of unreasonably reducing competition. And this will include, can they say what it'll include? I just kind of gave you a big tip with what we went through, what we were indicted for. Price fixing, allocating customers and markets with competitors, and other agreements with suppliers and customers. The Sherman Act prohibits a company in a dominant position from abusing its strength from an economic perspective. And that's what Wendy's talking about, which is a monopoly. And using that position in an unfair manner really is unreasonably reducing competition. So how about the Clayton Act?
Doesn't the Clayton Act just kind of like add on to it, like clarify it more even?
Yeah, it talks more about discriminatory pricing and tying and exclusive dealing arrangements. And it really applies to mergers, acquisitions, and joint ventures, which we were heavily into. Probably 70% of the makeup of our entire organization was as a result of joint of acquisitions, mergers. So we really were scrutinized for that. How about the FTCA? What is the FTCA? Any thoughts? So that's an administrative agency, and it regulates unfair methods of competition. Did somebody want to say anything?
Yes, the Federal Trade Commission Act.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's they do advisory opinions, counseling business on the legality of proposed activity.
Mm-hmm.
They do consent decrees, cease and desist orders, and says something about extreme measures requiring divestiture, selling off of business assets or subsidiaries.
Yeah, so technically it's not an antitrust law, but it authorizes the FTC, the Act authorizes the FTC to regulate conduct similar to that regulated under the Sherman, Clayton, Robinson-Patman Act. So again, it's authorizing the FTC to regulate that conduct. Good. All right, so let's go into some penalties for antitrust violations. So violation of the Sherman Act is like a felony. It is a felony, not like a felony. And likewise, many foreign jurisdictions also criminalize antitrust violations, including Japan, Canada, South Korea, Brazil, Austria, Germany, France, Belgium, Ireland, the United Kingdom. And in the US, an individual who violates antitrust laws may be imprisoned for up to 10 years and fined up to $1 million for each single violation. And a company that violates the US laws may be fined up to $1 million. Alternative US sentencing laws provide for even higher fines based on the profits or damages caused by the antitrust violation. So, you know, they're going to look at the injury, you know, that was suffered by the by those involved. Private lawsuits in the US can result in companies having to pay 3 times the amount of damages plus attorney's fees, and if they're found liable. And moreover, each individual and each corporation that participates in US antitrust violation is liable for 100% of the resulting damages or overcharges, even if the company only has a small share of the market. So it's a pretty big hit on an organization. And so to give you a little bit of understanding of what happened and how some of this came to be. So originally the price fixing, the plaintiff was the Department of Justice. The defendants were 2 of the big tuna fish giants. And you've got Bumblebee, Starkist, and Chicken of the Sea. Originally, we were a plaintiff. We were called to act as a witness. And as they got further into the investigation, they realized that we were part of it. I was not, the company was. They had, and how this all came to be, at one of the big tuna fish, they have these big tuna fish conferences where all the brokers from all over the world come together, and they have a big fish market, and they're buying fish and they're selling fish. And somebody had actually videotaped them, or not videotaped, but taped the meetings on their phone. And now, depending on where you live, if you record somebody on your phone, it's a crime. But they were making an agreement, so they both agreed to the details of the agreement, and they recorded them on their phone. Somehow somebody got a hold of that, and it was between the 2 companies, and they were going to keep the price of fish up. They were not going to let it go down because there was a shortage of fish. And then it turned around, and the shortage of fish, the fishing returned. So the market, the demand, should have pushed the price down, but they kept the pricing up. And then they colluded with a number of other companies and brought them into the mix, and they had several meetings, and DOJ, through the investigation, they seized phones, they seized lots of computer equipment, and they were able to recover a lot of the emails where the agreements were made between a lot of the senior sales staff, even a couple of the executives of the organization. So we eventually were exonerated from the price fixing, but we faced other indictments, so the company didn't scoot out of it all. And then I haven't paid any attention to where they're at this point, but I know that they're still in the process of going through the I don't know if they've concluded the investigation for the other companies, or they're moving on to trial or settlement. I don't know. But it's a very serious situation, and so not that anybody here is going to get involved in it, but it's very real. We seem to be kind of at an arm's length from it because we just read about it in the newspapers, but it's a pretty serious situation. Okay. Special note that I want to just share with you. The Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, they've announced that they will continue to emphasize prison terms for individuals who participate in price-fixing conspiracies. And offenders are being sent to prison with increasing frequency and longer prison time. There's one example in the division obtained criminal sentences for 34 individuals, totaling a record of 31,391 days of prison time. That was in 2007, and it reached an all-time high of 31 months. That's a lot of time. And then criminal and corporate fines are also increasing, and they've posted that over $500 million in fines imposed in each of the last 4 years. So they're prosecuting foreign nationals, and then of course they are always investigating a lot of the cartels. So just kind of a special note on the side. Okay, so recognizing red flags. This is we'll go through these because these are really interesting. So you understand the general principles and some of the penalties of the antitrust laws. It's important to understand how you recognize and deal with potential antitrust. And as I said, I mentioned the first one that we talked about, which was creating a pro forma that was less than the actual selling price. These are the types of things that you look at when you're dealing with consumer products, the sale, and some of the relationships and activities that are going on. So you've got relationships with competitors, with customers, mergers and acquisitions, monopolistic behavior, and then, of course, discrimination in pricing and promotions. There's exemptions from antitrust laws and special industries, and we'll cover a couple of those too. Okay. So relationships with competitors. So price fixing. This is probably one of the ones that we hear about most of the time. So Section 1 of the Sherman Act prohibits any agreement between competitors that unreasonably restrains competition. So here, what I shared with you, these fish brokers were getting together and they were setting the price. This actually happened years and years ago with the fuel industry, your gas stations. They were getting together and they would monitor the prices that were set on the street. And at one point, they actually got together and decided they were going to set the pricing for the fuel. So whatever price per gallon you were going to pay for that day. But that got broken up really quick before it got out of control. So competitors cannot agree or have any understanding or arrangement concerning prices, output or supply, markets or customers. Antitrust laws require that each competitor independently make its own commercial decisions about price, output, customers, and geographic areas of activity. An agreement among competitors may take any form. It does not have to be formal or written, and it can be an understanding. There's, I don't have them at my fingertips. I was going to pull them up and forgot, but there's one study case where the two were just having a conversation in a bar and agree to some price fixing, and it was overheard by somebody else, and they turned him in, and they ended up in prison. So any understanding, spoken or unspoken, or even a nudge and a wink, is enough to infer an unlawful conspiracy. So responding to the pressures of a competitor or doing what you know the competitor expects of you can be enough to suggest an agreement. An agreement can be inferred from conduct, speeches, statements to the press, informal discussions in a social setting, and more. Thus, avoid any type of conduct that could give rise to the inference of an agreement. And avoid contacts with competitors that could be seen as an invitation to collude. So yeah, I was going to give you another example of something, but that's another story, so I'm not going to go there. Let's see. Okay, so price fixing is the most serious type of anti-competitive conduct in an agreement, and is an agreement between competitors to set the price of something they sell. Likewise, an agreement to set discounts, freight charges, or payment terms, any element of price will be considered price fixing. So it doesn't just mean that I'm going to keep it at a certain price. Bid rigging is also a form of price fixing. They're always illegal, and under US law, always a criminal act. So never discuss it. Price fixing arrangements, it's worth repeating that even when most informal exchanges of price related information, they can result in criminal sanctions and substantial monetary penalties. It's imperative that you just avoid that discussion of any kind. So, I can't say enough about some of the behaviors that can contribute to price fixing. Allocating customers and territories. This was used. I mean, it's almost like you take one avenue away, or you find a way to punish for that particular thing, then somebody will try to find something else to leap on to be able to fix something. So there was this rush of allocating markets or customers, and it's when a competitor, that two competitors will, or a group of competitors will divide up and allocate customers, territories, or business opportunities, and it's always illegal. It restricts competition, and it reduces the number of products available to consumers and increase prices. So competitors cannot agree that they will not contain customers to certain areas, and they can't agree with a competitor that one of them will not bid on a contract or compete for customers either. So boycotts, let's talk about this a little bit. Who wants to read this one? I'm doing all the reading, and I think it's probably kind of boring to listen to me read. So who wants to read number 3, boycotts?
I can.
Okay, go for it.
Agreement not to do business with a supplier or customer, or to do business only with certain suppliers or customers, may be illegal boycott.
Okay, so keep going.
Relationships with customers. Antitrust law prohibits certain agreements between companies at different levels of distribution chain. Our commercial decisions must be unilateral. There can be no discussions or agreements with a customer, competitor, or supplier. We may decide which customers and suppliers we want to deal with as long as we make our decisions independently. We may adopt a business strategy designed to protect our self-interest. Legal department should review business arrangements that raise any red flags.
Good, good. So before you take any steps or any action jointly with a competitor that targets another competitor or a supplier or a customer, talk to counsel, because you could really think you're doing something innocently, and when in fact it is going to affect the consumer, and that's what you always have to look at. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Oh, all right. So we have a pop quiz. Who wants to read our pop quiz? Can somebody read it?
I'll read it.
Sure, I can.
Pricing agreement between a supplier and a customer is always illegal.
So do you want to take a stab at it? Is it correct or incorrect?
Because of the operative word of always, I'd say false.
So A or B? B. That's
B.
correct. Some conduct, price fixing between two or more competitors, for example, is considered illegal per se, meaning that it violates antitrust laws. Even if it benefits consumers and does no provable harm to competition, it still is illegal per se. Most conduct, however, including an agreement between a supplier and a customer, is judged by the so-called rule of reason, meaning that it will not be considered illegal if its overall effect is to enhance competition for the benefit of the consumer. So sometimes you got to really dig into it. All right, good job. So let me jump to our next slide. All right, relationships with customers continued. So who wants to read price-related restrictions?
I'll read it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, regarding the price-related restrictions, a resale price maintenance agreements between supplier and customers set prices at which the customers will resell suppliers' products or services. It's assessed under the rule of reason. The seller must provide a reasonable pro-competitive justification for price restriction.
Right, they have to show, what do they have to show? Why are they showing? What are they showing? It's good for competition. So if they can argue that, then, they can maybe get it passed under the rule of reason. But this is, again, these are some of these red flags when you have a relationship with customer that could potentially get you into trouble for price fixing. So let's always remember where we're going with this. So geographic or customer restrictions. Who wants to go ahead and take that one?
I can do it.
Okay.
Legality of agreement between manufacturer and distributor. The distributor may sell only in certain territories or to certain types of customer depends on facts and circumstances.
Right. So this could be illegal, and it's going to depend on the facts and the circumstances. Territorial restraints imposed by a supplier on its resellers are generally legitimate as long as the supplier's decision is made unilaterally and the restraints are intended to enable the supplier to better compete with other suppliers of like products. So I work for a distribution company, and we limited where we went so we could be a better supplier, and some of it had to do with the type of product. Some of it was a perishable product, so getting it to the the grocer, we couldn't compete if we didn't limit where our territories were. But it didn't mean that we could pick and choose the customer that we wanted to deliver to, but it couldn't be because we didn't want to compete with that one down the road. It had to be for a valid reason. Maybe they didn't, I don't know, they're, maybe they weren't credit worthy. But it had to be a unilateral, and the restraints had to be, they had to intend to enable the supplier to better compete. So then we've got resale price maintenance. I don't know if I added that one on here. No, I didn't. So minimum resale price maintenance is an agreement between a seller and its customers on a resale price or a price level that the resale price will not go below. I'm not even going to go much into that because you're not going to really deal with that one at all. So, but it falls into the red flag of geographic or customer restrictions. Okay, let's see. I've got exclusive dealing. Okay, so that agreements that require a customer to buy all or some of its products, that can raise antitrust concerns because you're forcing a supplier to buy, in order to buy product from you. You're putting unreasonable constraints on them for periods of time, and that by itself can really step into antitrust issues. They raise big concerns, and so it's just not something that another place that we want to go. It's definitely a red flag. So tying, let's see. We've already talked about geographic or customer restrictions. Tying is where a supplier offers to sell a customer a desirable product or service only if the customer agrees to buy something else of a lesser product. And they're forcing the customer to purchase that lesser, less desirable product. So that's definitely a red flag. You see that happen sometimes, but it's not a lot.
I know that was something that Microsoft actually got hit for.
Yeah.
When they were dealing, they had to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars because they were requiring computer companies to have their operating system if they wanted to receive certain types of software or something. I can't remember what all was involved with that, but I know they got hit with it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And yeah, I remember that. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a good example of that. There's been some other cases, but it's pretty easy to prove it. So I think, most companies have, they're very careful with that. So reciprocal dealing, it's conditional purchasing. You want to avoid the appearance of an agreement that links your purchases from suppliers to their purchases from you. So you'll get this PowerPoint. I'll post it, and so you'll get it. And you can read a little bit more about these. I'm not going to go into dual distribution too much. Again, so much of they're red flags, but they all go back to the same thing with communication, and so caution should be taken with regard to the communication between company-owned and independent distributors. Issues can arise with regard to territorial restrictions, especially if you've got scheduling, merchandising programs, when you've got consumer packaged goods out there. You need to be able to enable the independent distributor to really compete effectively. So dual distribution, a good example of that would be, you know, like I used to work for a grocery distribution company. We sold to what were called jobbers. Now, we both competed out there because we both sold to the same group of businesses. It was convenience stores. So if you had like a Texaco convenience store or a 7-Eleven, we would sell to them. But then you get the jobbers who'd come along, and jobbers were really people that were businesses that would come in and like sell some of the trinkets, or they might sell special cookies. And the way they sold the product is they guaranteed it. So they would sell it to the independent grocer there, and then if it didn't sell, they gave it full value for when they bought it back. They would buy it back, but the price was usually marked up. But you know, the grocer would be willing to pay the marked up price for a guaranteed sale. So if it didn't sell, he got the full price back. But what this was saying is that we have, as a grocery distribution company, we had to treat fairly those independent distributors. So, okay, mergers and acquisitions. So this is what we were talking about earlier, where Clayton Act prohibits mergers and acquisitions that could lessen competition or create a monopoly. Transactions that meet certain size criteria must be reported to the government agencies and undergo government review before they may be consummated. So when there was, let's see, what was one that just recently, they happen all the time. Go ahead.
Office Depot and Office Max merged.
Yeah.
And they wanted to take on Staples, and they were denied.
Right. It was, so Bumblebee Tuna made, let's see, I think it was Bumblebee made an offer to purchase StarKist. And so those two companies, Chicken of the Sea, reported those two for the price fixing. That's how that all started. So in the middle of this acquisition that was going on, the DOJ shut it down, but they were going to deny it anyway because it was going to put one of the tuna companies at a significant advantage in the market. So they said they were going to deny it anyway. But yeah, so pay attention to those that you see in the the news, and yeah, good example. I appreciate that with that, Susan. So pre-merger reporting, again, they have to submit the documents. You just can't go out and say, hey, I'm buying it, here I go. They have to submit it to the government agencies from their officers so that the agencies can evaluate the competitive effects on the transaction, and they will really scrutinize it. So it's all reports, studies, projections, analyses with respect to the particular transaction. And if the documents were written without any regard to the antitrust significance of the contents, they may include language that can jeopardize a transaction if the government challenges it as anti-competitive. So they have, typically you're going to have some very skilled attorneys that's all they do are merger and acquisitions, you know, to assist in that. All right, we're going to have a little pop quiz. One thing I wanted to add that when you talk about mergers and acquisitions, antitrust issues can arise in an acquisition when when the merger or the joint venture involving stock or assets are included in that. And assets are like patents, trademarks, copyrights, equipment, of course, leases, lines of business, just your typical assets. So when you've got those types of things involved where it's very, heavily laden money-ish pieces, that's usually that can be a red flag and create some antitrust issues. Okay, so who wants to read this one? It gets very boring when I read it, so somebody else can.
I can read it, but someone else has to answer it.
Okay.
Companies considering a merger are allowed to share information with each other so that they can accurately evaluate their prospective business opportunity.
So true or false? Who wants to take a guess?
I would say true, because a lot of times they'll discuss mergers.
So the correct answer is B. So even during merger negotiation, the rules prohibiting the sharing of sensitive business information by competitors must be followed. They cannot. They have to follow the rules. Now, there's certain pieces of information that they can share. I mean, obviously, if they're going to merge, they're going to want to see some financial statements. But there are specific things that they cannot share. So it's not everything. They're not allowed to share all pieces of information.
So does that mean there's a middleman that decides what happens, or how does that work?
Oh, no. Okay, well, let me put it this way. You don't just call up the president of the company and say, hey, I think we ought to get together. Because that by itself is going to open up a window of antitrust issues. Typically, you're going to have somebody that's going to be acting for you and as a spokesperson to start discussions. All right. So a lot of this is going to be weighed through before you even really bring the two prospective executives, owners together. It's very finely calculated and it's finely tuned so that you don't breach any kind of antitrust laws. Now, if you're going, this is what happened with Bumblebee and StarKist. They wanted to get big. All right, that was the bottom line. And so the way to do it is for two giants to merge. All right, and their intent was to push the other one or two that was in the market out. That's what they're trying to do is get more market share. That's what anybody's trying to do when they're out there trying to make their company be successful. The more market that they can get, the better off that they can be. Hopefully the more revenue they can create. But when you start mergers and acquisitions, I mean, you do have to start with some sort of talk, but you're best served if you can do it through a third party so that you keep everything neutral and it's evaluated. There's a lot of companies, not a lot, but there's companies out there that's what they do. And so they know how to protect their clients from, keeping that isolated perspective so that they don't breach that. Now you got to remember that you can make you can talk to somebody. There's nothing that says that you can't talk to them, because remember, it's going to go to antitrust anyway. So if you make an offer to a company, it's going to go to antitrust for their review. So just like Joe was talking about, or Susan was talking about with Staples and Office Depot, They decided that they were going to merge, and it got denied. But most large companies are going to have an M&A, attorney group probably work for them on their behalf.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, are mergers turned down or accepted other than based on the antitrust laws? Does this have to do with the Herfindahl Index? Or I just remember hearing about that in some of my accounting classes.
Well, when there's a lot, I don't know all the detail, what can disqualify a successful merger or an acquisition. But from this perspective, from antitrust, the reason that it would be denied, what are antitrust laws there for? What is the sole purpose for antitrust?
To promote competition, right? If I understand that. Okay.
Right. We don't want to reduce competition by unfair means. So it's to protect and promote free and fair competition in the marketplace for the benefit of the consumers. So if we get one big old giant power out there that decides that they are going to be the one and only tuna fish supplier, you can imagine what will happen with the price of tuna fish. A can of tuna fish, goes from 99 cents up to $4.99 a can. So that's outrageous. So that's when those two companies come together and the antitrust gets involved, that's what they're going to do. I mean, good or bad. So in the case where a company is indicted for violating antitrust laws, they've done something, they've sent their flag up, those flags that we looked at. That's what they'll do. And they'll watch the market. The antitrust folks that are scrutinizing the market, they're going to look at the market. They're going to say, okay, the market's going up or the market's going down, but the price is staying. What's going on here? And that is exactly what they'll look at. So they're looking at those flags, and they'll hone in on those flags and say, okay, now we're going to start looking at something. But so you've got that situation, and then you've got the situation where you just have two companies that decide to merge. As part of the requirement for that merge, before they can, they can finalize it, it has to go to antitrust. That's just part of the business process. It's kind of like you get your car ready, you bought a car, and they go in and they detail it out for you, so to speak, in a very, very low general sense. So you can't pick up the car till it's detailed out. Well, the company can't emerge as a new company with the acquisition until they've been scrutinized by antitrust. Okay, does that make sense? And if they don't pass the muster of antitrust and it's going to violate it, then they will be denied. Okay? Does that make sense? Does anybody else have anything they wanted to add to that? What they think is relevant?
I do have a question about this whole presentation today.
Mm-hmm.
Is any of this going to be on the test that's opening up this Thursday? Because this is all information that we're supposed to be studying next week.
Well, you've got some on it this week. I'll have to go and look at the test for, I thought there are some. So we studied a couple of the cases a couple weeks ago, didn't we? The Baker, was it Baker versus Monkey? I think we studied that. That will be on there. But there will be a few antitrust pieces on there.
So should we go ahead and read chapter 22 to be ready for the test that we're having this Thursday?
Hang on 1 minute. Hold on 1 minute. Joe, let me pull something up real quick. Let's see. Sorry, I'm like 2 seconds away, and all right. Yeah, biker versus man, that's in there. I think we did Dirks versus SEC. So the, okay, so next week, this exam 5 opens up fairly soon too. So exam 4 is going to talk about business structures and taxation and director and owner liability, and a few questions on securities. And so antitrust comes in the next one.
Okay, thank you.
There is a PowerPoint that I've got together for business formations, and I'll put that on there, and it'll be helpful because it'll have some good references for the exam, exam 4, and then exam 5 will have antitrust. Next week's office hour, we're gonna dive pretty deep into employment law. I think you guys will all enjoy that one. But yeah, I'll post this PowerPoint so you'll be able to see it and review it. And it'll be good for the final exam too, because there's several questions on there with antitrust damages, monopolies, tying, price fixing. So, yeah. And we do need to know the acts. So, okay, let me switch gears here real quick. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Sherman Act prohibits monopolization. It's unreasonable business behavior, and it prohibits that monopolization and conspiracies to monopolize. So in order to monopolize, a company must have monopoly power, and it generally means the ability to control prices, drive competitors out of the market, and prevent them from entering the market. In addition, there's also an element of deliberateness required. So there's some sort of conduct or behavior that shows intent, such as predatory conduct. That's where the tie-in sales come in. Output and supply contracts. So I don't want to dive a lot into that. It's pretty self-explanatory. Let's see, I'm going to, we're getting late, so I'm going to try to scoot on through this. I do want to just really quick, this is a fun little read about. Robinson-Patman Act. So this prohibits a seller from discriminating between customers on price, terms, or promotional services. And it's illegal to charge different prices for products to competing customers if the price difference lessens competition, right? Because there are some times when you can like have one contract for one competitor and another contract for that competitor, but it can't lessen the competition. So it's a cost justification defense permits a seller to change a different price to a customer if it reflects an actual difference in the cost of serving that customer. So let's see. Okay. I think this is the last pop quiz. And then I think we'll wrap it up for the evening and you guys can read some of the other. Oh, there's one more. Yeah, special industries. So which of the following is not a type of price discrimination? A, B, or C? Who wants to take a...
Could it be C?
Would it be C?
No, the Robinson-Patman Act prohibits a supplier from discriminating between competing customers regarding price, terms, or promotional services. It does not cover discrimination on the basis of age. So A is correct. It does not cover discrimination on the basis of age. So they kind of threw a red herring in there. So A is correct. Okay. And then really quickly, I wanted just to cover, and then we'll get out of here. So there's, if you work in the following areas, you have to understand that there's different antitrust issues. So in insurance, there's some exemptions from antitrust laws as long as the conduct is subject to state regulation. Healthcare providers, they're subject to antitrust laws and face many of the same issues, but they do have some activities that they can fall within a safety zone, which, you know, it's an activity that's unlikely to raise competitive concerns. So I just wanted to mention those. There's a couple more, but those are the two that are most prevalent. So I appreciate your attendance tonight and thank you for your participation. I hope you've enjoyed the PowerPoint, and I'll post it for everybody to use as some guidelines and some extra material for preparation. Any questions?
I had a question about the last exam appeal, or excuse me, the exam adjustments. There were 2 questions that you said that you were going to give us credit for. Have you gone through and done that for everybody's?
I did. So here's the deal. If you got it correct, you didn't get the correct. The people that got credit for it were the ones that missed it. But if you chose the right answer and got credit for it in the exam, there wasn't more credit given.
Okay, because I was just wondering if you could double check on mine, because I've got both of them wrong and my grade hasn't changed.
Oh, yeah, I would be happy to. And
so, thank you.
I would, and actually I appreciate you bringing that up, Jody, because I was going to send an email for everybody to double check it. I thought it was really took a lot of time to go through those. And there's only one way for me to check to see if I actually made the correction. And it was just a really time-consuming project. And I was extremely frustrated by that situation. So anyway, but yes, I will be more than happy to look at it. And if anybody else feels that I didn't get it corrected, please send me a quick email and I'll take a look at it. Be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had one.
Okay.
So on the extra credit hypothetical question and essay, So I
Yeah.
know that in the discussion board, that's where we get all the information for that. But it says that we need to post that in a quiz, and I just can't find the quiz anywhere. I just was wondering where
Is-
that's going to pop up.
So has anybody else seen the quiz? I can see it. And it should be active, Derek. So you're saying you're not seeing the quiz? Can I get maybe the rest of you when you get a second to check to see if you can see the quiz? It's not really a quiz. You've got the questions. It's just a place to post the answer.
What
so-
would it be in lesson 10?
No, it's open right now. Let me,
I did a search and I couldn't find it, and it's not in week 10.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, and this is the first time that I've added extra credit, so there might be something that I'm missing that I need to put in there. I'll make sure that I follow.
So
Yeah,
when you click
ahead.
on quizzes, you can okay, so I went ahead and I clicked on quiz on up here, and then you come down to the bottom of the current ones, and there's extra credit corporations, extra credit employment law. And one of them ends on December 10th, the other ends on December 12th. Are those the ones?
So that's how I see them.
Yeah, I can see those. Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, great. Okay, good. And so what I want to share with you on those, they kind of loom large. Don't get overly freaked out by them. And just do your best. It's an opportunity to get extra credit. I will take the next week. I was going to do it this week, but I ran out of time. I'll cover the corporations one for you. I gave you a hint. There's two big issues, and I'll give you a hint with the employment law too. And I'll just touch on them briefly next week on how I want you to present the issues. The bottom line is being able to relate the issue to the rule, the law. And how would the court rule in your eyes for that particular situation? And so there's a couple issues, like I said, there's a couple issues in the corporation ones, 2 issues in the corporations, and I think there's 2 or 3 in the employment law. But it's a good way to look at how, when you're evaluating a situation, you have a client comes in and says, okay, this is what's going on. What are you going to look at to help him win his case, or help the employer win his case, whatever the situation is? So, and they're worth the almost near what a regular exam would be. So it should, help if you've struggled on some of the other exams. You should be able to help yourself with completing these exams, by completing these exams. So I hope you do, and take the opportunity to get the extra credit. Okay?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet.
Great.
My pleasure. Okay, could I get a volunteer for a closing prayer, and we'll go ahead and, you guys, I've kept you way longer than I should have. So, Jody?
If you'd like it.
Great, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Our dearest Heavenly Father, we come before Thee this night. We give Thee thanks and gratitude for the time that has been spent to further our knowledge and our education. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for BYU Idaho and for the online program that allows all of us to participate, to further our education, to be able to make ourselves better and prepare ourselves for employment opportunities and growth. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for our prophet, for our leaders that have been inspired and lead us and guide us closer to Thee in Thy programs. Heavenly Father, we'd like to ask a special blessing to be over us as we separate in our various locations, that we will continue to be safe, that our minds will be clear if further work is to be done. And please keep us safe. In the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. That was a beautiful prayer, and thank you so much. Well, everybody have a great week. And again, I'll post another presentation on corporations, so you've got that to reference for this week's exam, and then this one you'll see as well. So thanks for coming tonight, and have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.